With all these Just Stop Oil protests in the news, I thought it might be helpful and hopefully interesting to just discuss a few issues, specifically why aren't the police necessarily arresting people straight away? Some recent changes in the law that might very much affect how things are now happening on the ground. What might happen to people who, quote, take the law into their own hands to get past such protests, and also some US law that might become vaguely relevant. First of all, though, when people say, well, hang on, why aren't the police just arresting these people? They're slow walking, that's obstructing the highway. Well, yeah, obstructing the highway is an offence. However, it's a very narrowly drawn offence. It's probably easier to start with, what are you allowed to do on the highway? Well, highways are for passing, repassing, and things incidental thereto. So on the face of it, that's just driving. But, can you park on the road? Well, yeah, the courts have said, of course you can, because otherwise, if that wasn't implicit, we wouldn't need double yellow lines. Can you do any other activities in the road? What if you want to pull up in your ice cream van, sell ice cream? Well, actually, yeah, that's been allowed. But what if you've got a little market stall at the side of the road and you're sort of blocking the road? Well, again, yeah, that has been allowed, breaking down, changing wheels, etc., etc. It's not really obstruction of the highway unless you permanently block it and nobody can get past. The mere fact that you create a chicane, you make it inconvenient to get past, or there's an impedance, as long as you're not blocking it, that's not obstruction of the highway. What about going slowly? In the absence of a sign with a minimum speed limit, which does exist, you go slowly as you want. And I live in Cornwall, so I know what it's like to be stuck behind slow things. But you go, well, yeah, but these people are walking, roads are for cars. These people are walking. Well, actually, yeah, unless it's a motorway, you can walk on a road, you can take your horse, you can take your bike, take your roller skates. And again, there's no minimum speed limit. You can walk as slowly as you want. But then people say, well, hang on, this is causing disruption. Yes. And this is where something called the Public Order Act comes in. And the Public Order Act has something called Section 12. And Section 12 says that if the police believe that activities are causing, quote, serious disruption, then they can warn the person committing the act. And if the person doesn't stop doing the act, then they can be arrested. And you're actually arrested and charged with breach of Section 12 Public Order Act. That is the offence. You can challenge that, and people have successfully challenged after the fact. They've said, well, either on technical grounds, the police didn't give the notice in the correct way, because the police actually have to give it at the scene to the people. You can't just tweet it out generally or anything like that. And sometimes the courts have said, well, actually, that wasn't serious disruption. Because one of the tests of serious disruption is prolonged disruption. And this is where we've seen the police are effectively going, right, you've got 15 minutes, but after 15 minutes, we're saying this is prolonged. So we're going to issue the notice, and if you still carry on, then we are going to nick you. But there's been a recent amendment to the Public Order Act. And that now has changed serious disruption to, quote, more than minor. So the test now is, if your activities cause more than minor disruption, then that's enough to trigger a Section 12 warning. So that's obviously a lot lower threshold. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now. But what if people, want to get past these people anyway? Well, there's a thing called Section 3 defence. And Section 3 basically says you can use reasonable force to prevent the commission of a crime. But we've just said this might not be a crime. So would Section 3 apply? Possibly not. But there's also there's a defence called necessity. And necessity is where you accept you yourself committed an offence, say for instance assault. However, that was to prevent a greater harm. The classic example is drink driving to take people to hospital. Let's say it's a situation somebody needs emergency treatment, there's nobody else who can drive, there's no way of getting an ambulance there, the only person who knows how to drive just happens to be over the limit. In those circumstances, the courts have said, much as we disapprove of drink driving, and while it's normally a crime, in this particular instance, this was necessary. And necessity is a defence to every crime except murder. And we'll have a chat about why that is, because there's a very interesting case to do with eating the cabin boy on a shipwreck. And I do intend to do a big video about that at some stage. What else might happen? Well, in the US, where this is a big political issue, and people have, protesters have been seriously injured and worse by people effectively deliberately driving into them. Some states have introduced legislation that effectively gives immunity, both civil and criminal, to drivers who are involved in, cause harm to people protesting in the road. Now, when you delve into some of these, it's not necessarily changing the law that much. It says things like, well, so long as the driver wasn't, negligent themselves, and this wasn't a wanton or deliberate or reckless act, and it's the burden is on the plaintiff in a civil case and the prosecution in a criminal case to prove that the driver was at fault. Well, that's the test anyway. Nothing has actually changed there. Although the Texas version removed all that, and you must not have been wanton or reckless. I mean, that pretty much was just a free for all. None of these have been passed, although some of them have come very, very close in votes. And it'll be interesting to see if anybody here talks about introducing laws like this, either seriously or, just for the politics of it. But I just thought you might find that useful, and it gives some context. And now when you're watching the news going, right, now I see why the police are waiting. And also, like I say, I must keep saying, if you did like this video, please consider clicking the appropriate button for that. And also, maybe consider subscribing, and then you'll get notification of content. And like I say, I always like reading your comments. So, any comment suggestions, follow-up queries, stick them in there, because I get a lot of inspiration. And it's just nice to engage with people rather than just talking to a webcam as I am at the moment.